you think about science, you probably picture the greatest hits, right? Newton getting hit by the apple, Einstein and his famous equations. But behind all those big, flashy milestones, there are these other stories, other experiments that are just as important, even if we don't hear about them as much. Okay, let's get into this.
And that quote right there, that's exactly what we're talking about today. It perfectly sets the stage. We're going to be diving into the messy, complicated, and honestly, way more fascinating side of discovery. The side where the questions you're left with are sometimes way more powerful than the answers you find.
So here's what we've got lined up. We're going to look at Tesla's wild dream of wireless power, then jump to Pavlov's totally accidental discovery about how our brains work. After that, we'll get into Milgram's really unsettling experiment on obedience, and then we'll pull it all together and see why these stories still matter so much. So let's start by taking a look back. And just to be clear, these aren't just some quirky little footnotes in a history book. Nope. These are experiments that literally changed the game. They completely reshaped how we think about energy, how our own minds are wired, and even the basics of human morality. First up, Nikola Tesla. Now, we've all heard the name, for sure, but we're going way beyond the stuff you already know. We're talking about a vision that was so huge, so ambitious, it was basically science fiction at the time. A plan to light up the entire planet with no wires attached. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. A world without wires. This wasn't just about inventing a new gadget for him. This was about completely redesigning our relationship with energy. He imagined a world where power was just there, all around us, as easy to get and as invisible as the air we breathe. So how was he going to pull this off? Well, with this thing called the Wardenclyffe Tower, it wasn't just a building. It was supposed to be a global transmitter. Step 1, build this absolutely massive 57-meter-tall tower. Step 2, pump an insane amount of high-frequency electricity into it. And here's the wild part. Step 3, he believed he could use the Earth itself and the sky above it as giant conductors to beam that energy anywhere on the globe. And the final goal? Limitless, wireless power for every single person.
But, well, the dream ran headfirst into a brick wall of reality. His spectacular vision of global wireless electricity completely fell apart when the money ran out. The project was just abandoned. He dreamed of limitless, free energy for everybody, and what did we end up with? That little wireless charging pad for your phone. So, his idea wasn't totally wrong, it was just maybe a century or two ahead of its time.
All right, let's switch gears. We're going from this huge, deliberate plan to a moment of pure, accidental discovery. We're heading back to the 1890s, where a Russian scientist named Ivan Pavlov was just trying to study how dogs digest their food. And he stumbled onto something that would change psychology forever. You see, Pavlov's work started to answer this question. And the funny thing is, he wasn't even trying to. He was studying dog drool, of all things. But what he noticed ended up laying the foundation for understanding why we do the things we do, why we form the habits we have. So here's how it worked. It's actually pretty simple. Before he started, ringing a bell meant nothing to the dogs. No reaction. Then, during the experiments, he'd ring the bell right before he gave them food. And of course, food makes a dog drool. He did this over and over and over again until the dog's brains made a new connection. And pretty soon, just the sound of the bell, all by itself, was enough to make them start salivating. A brand new behavior was literally created out of thin air. And here's the thing. This was never just about dogs and bells. This accidental discovery became the bedrock of a whole school of psychology called behaviorism. It's the reason a silly little jingle on a commercial can make you suddenly crave a soda. It's used in everything from training animals to teaching kids, and it's even used now to build AI that can predict what we're going to do next. The legacy of this accident is just immense.
Okay, for our last story, we're taking a much darker, much more serious turn. This is 1961. In the shadow of World War II, a psychologist named Stanley Milgram wanted to investigate one of history's most chilling questions, and what he did became one of the most controversial experiments ever conducted.
This is the question, the one right at the heart of Milgram's work, and it's a deeply uncomfortable question, isn't it? We'd all like to think we'd immediately say no way, but Milgram, well, he wanted to find out what ordinary people just like you and me, would actually do when someone in charge told them to do something terrible.
65%. That's the number that sent shockwaves through the world. 65% of the volunteers in his experiment who were told to act as teachers were willing to administer what they thought was a real, painful 450-volt electric shock to another person. And why? simply because a guy in a lab coat told them they had to continue.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because it's not just about that one number. Obedience, it turns out, isn't just an on or off switch. When the authority figure was right there in the room, yeah, 65% obeyed. But when he gave the orders over the phone, that number dropped all the way down to 21%. And get this, if the participants saw someone else in the room refuse, the obedience rate plummeted to just 10%. It turns out the situation you're in and seeing just one other person stand up changes everything.
So let's step back and try to connect the dots here. We've got a visionary inventor, a scientist who made a discovery by accident, and a social scientist who stirred up a ton of controversy. They seem totally different, right? But what are the big lessons we can pull from all three?
When you put them all side by side like this, you start to see a really cool pattern. Tesla, he asked how we could power the world, and he taught us a lesson about the incredible power of just having a huge, ambitious vision. Pavlov, he asked how we learn, and he showed us the hidden, automatic power of association. And Milgram, he asked why we obey, and he uncovered the deeply unsettling power of authority.
And in the end, that's what these experiments really do. They're more than just science projects that give us facts. They really do hold up a mirror to us. Tesla's dream is a mirror for our greatest ambitions. Pavlov's dogs are a mirror for how our own minds are shaped by the world around us. And Milgram's experiment, well, that's a mirror for a really difficult truth about human nature.
And that kind of leaves us with one final thing to think about. These three stories were almost forgotten, right? But their lessons about ambition, about behavior, about morality, they're more important now than ever. It really makes you wonder, in our own time, as we chase the next big breakthrough, what crucial lessons from the messy, the failed, and the forgotten parts of science are we overlooking right now?